speak to any other organizers or panelists on the line. When you are ready to begin the presentation, press the Start Broadcast button on the GoToWebinar control panel to allow all attendees to hear you. This system will notify you once you begin your broadcast. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
We'll have joined, so thank you so much for joining. Just a quick orientation around GoToWebinar. If you have any questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A panel, and we'll also be including a handout to this deck. So if you guys want to get a sneak peek, jump ahead and see what we're covering, you're definitely more than welcome to do that. This webinar will be recorded, so it will be shared with you all after the fact, including the slides and all. All right, so it looks like we pretty much have quorum here for everybody that was looking to sign up and join this session today. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. If this is your first masterclass or any session in the Desk to Service Cloud series, hopefully you're in for a treat, but ultimately what we definitely want to promise is to make it answer your questions. So with that said, just know that anytime you can ask questions in the GoToWebinar Q&A panel. I'm joined here with my colleagues Suzanne and Patrick. So you've probably heard us before on some of the other master classes or office hours. So we're really here to make you guys successful in the transition from Desk to Service Cloud. In terms of agenda, we're going to try to cover as much as we can in about 90 minutes of content and about 30 minutes of participation and getting your feedback. This is the first time we're running this, so towards the end, I really hope that you guys stay on and give us a little bit of feedback. Did we cover the things that you guys needed in depth? What could we do differently? We really are trying to tailor this to be pretty much a one-stop shop for all the things that you need to know when you're making the transition from Desk over to Salesforce. So in terms of the actual content today, we'll be talking a little bit about planning your move. Since it's generally good to measure twice and cut once, we'll cover some of the high-level things that's important for everybody to know when they're making the move. We'll do a Service Console walkthrough. We'll be talking about migrating your data. We'll be talking about how to really replicate any automations that you have in Desk, whether that's rules, macros, or any kind of quick text that you're using. And then we'll get more into setting up your email, preparing to go live, actually going live, and some troubleshooting or FAQs that could help that path a little bit more. So just a quick recap for anybody that's joining right now. This will be recorded. There should be slides in the GoToWebinar files area. So if you want to skip ahead and see what we're covering, you're more than welcome to do that. If you have any questions throughout, please feel free to put them into the Q&A panel. We'll be reserving the majority of actual Q&A time towards the end because we do have a lot of content to cover. So I hope everybody's comfortable, has their coffees, and is pumped up about learning as much as you can about Service Cloud and the transition in this session. All right, now before I kick it off, Suzanne and Patrick, are there any other housekeeping notes that I've forgotten to mention before we really get going?
No, I think we're good. Just a quick note that the agenda is not on right now in case you wanted to showcase that.
Ah, yes, I did. Thank you for letting me know that. Is it now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
Looks good on my end.
This is why you need co-pilots. Okay. All right, so let's just jump in then. And the one reminder here at the bottom of this agenda is that the one thing, just because we have, restricted time and we want to prioritize the key things, the support center, we're not covering that today, but there's a masterclass that we run on that's recorded. So feel free to watch that if you do have a support center. That's the one thing that we're probably not gonna get into today. All right, so with that, let's talk about the actual planning piece. So as I mentioned, measure twice, cut once is a really good idea when you're making the move to Service Cloud, namely because you may not actually need to do everything that you did in Desk, and we want to make your lives really easy. So we've created this checklist to kind of give you the high level information that you need if you want to think about, have I done everything? What else is there to know? This is a good one to start with. So number one, make sure you have created a Service Cloud trial. Now, this is applicable probably for everybody. If you are moving into an existing Salesforce instance with your support team, you can still use the trial org to see what it looks like and what the customizations are that make it a little bit easier to stand up. But for those of you that don't already have Salesforce at your company, you definitely want to create this trial link, because that is where you're going to move your desk support team licenses to, and that's where you'll be providing support. Once you've created the trial, and just know you can create multiple trials. They do expire after a period of time. So at this point, if you've had one in the past and you don't have one anymore, just create another one. There's no really limit to how many you can create. Then contractually, you definitely want to make sure that you've swapped your contract. There's a few reasons to that. Number one, there are some limits to the trial org, so you can't send all of the emails that you may want to send. You can only have up to 10 users. So if your desk instance has more than 10 people providing support, you can't really go live until you sign the contract. So you can, of course, test and set up, do all of those things that you need to do, but it's definitely a good idea to sign that swap contract sooner rather than later. One caveat here is if you are a non-for-profit org, make sure you do that even sooner than you think. The non-for-profit contract side can take a little bit longer, so give yourself as much advanced time as you need. And so with that, at this point, depending on sort of where you're at in the desk cycle, you may actually not even need a desk courtesy site. They just may be extended to the end of life, which is March 13th. But just in case, double check the person that's creating your contract. Ultimately, you want to make sure you have access to desk.com without it getting turned off. So if you haven't yet kind of emailed in saying you need to get extra time, make sure you have a desk courtesy contract when you're signing the swap so your desk site doesn't get turned off while you're configuring things. This next point is only really applicable for those of you moving into existing Salesforce instances. So best practice is you want to do most of your configuration into the sandbox, and any data migrations, work with your Salesforce admins. They're the ones that are going to really tell you what you can and cannot do and what the best practices are. But typically, a partial sandbox or a full sandbox are good for you to set up in any existing Salesforce instances. Next is data migration. So for those of you that may have had existing Salesforce instances with Desk Connect enabled, this may actually not even apply to you. Maybe all your cases are already in your Salesforce org, but for the most of us, we do need to actually take the desk data that we have, all the cases that customers have emailed in, and then bring those over to Salesforce. So the migration wizard, Patrick's going to cover that later today, is a really great tool to bring that over. It can start to stutter a little bit if you have more than roughly 500,000 cases, or if you have a lot of attachments, or overall just a high level of volume. So just be mindful of that. And for those of you guys that have support centers, you can also use the migration wizard to bring over your articles. So when you're actually preparing to configure, the first thing that you generally want to do is figure out what you actually have in your desk site. So do a bit of a desk audit, review the labels that you're using, the macros, any groups you're using, and you can use the Desk built-in business insights tool to do that. That helps you get an idea of of all the stuff that you may have created or have been created by people in the past, are you actually using those things? And if you have a lot, it can at least help you stack rank and figure out what you should build first. So that's through the desk site. There's a built-in reporting tool called Business Insights. So that's where you can get that utilization information. And then from a configuration point of view, when you log into Desk on the admin side, what are the rules that you're using, and also macros that you've created? What do those things actually do? So if you have inherited a Desk site, or maybe you've just been using it for a very long time, the chances are that you're using everything is pretty slim. So look through the rules, figure out what it's actually doing, and ultimately you want to bring over the simplest version of what you have. You'd also want to audit your support center if you use one, and if you have any other ways that customers can create cases, maybe you're using the API, maybe you have multiple emails, maybe you're using other social channels, or anything else that could be creating cases that customers would want to still contact you on. Just go through and figure out if anything else is creating cases for you, so that way you can get an idea of what you actually need to build out. So once you figure that all out, you'll actually start configuring. So macros that you had in Desk may become macros in Salesforce, or they may come quick text, and Suzanne is going to cover that later today. Rules, again, depending on what you did in Desk, you may do those in Salesforce, but we'll talk through some of those things later on as well. If you use the support center, you'll be building out what's called a community, and community we'll cover in a different session in a different masterclass that there's resource links for as well. You may be building out templates, you'll be adjusting some support settings for notifications, and most importantly, you're going to be testing everything that you build out. So if you have a rule or if you have some kind of routing, make sure you plan some time to test to make sure it performs as expected. After you've configured things, or maybe even before, it's always a good idea to really learn how to use this new tool. You can basically do the same job that you're doing today, but the tool is going to look very different. So make sure you take some time to review some of the resources that we're providing. There's fantastic trails, and as well, we have some short videos that our team's created to really help you get stood up, and as well, make sure your team comes along for that as well. Suzanne is going to be talking about some cutover steps at the end, but at high level, at one point, you're going to rerun the migration wizard to get your latest cases. You're going to connect your emails. You're going to just make sure you did some last minute testing, and then you're going to start working in Service Cloud. So that's the bird's eye view, and we'll talk about some of these things in depth today, but if you just needed a place to start, that's where it is. All right, so what I'll do next is kind of give you guys the high-level Service Console walkthrough. So if you, at this point, haven't seen Service Cloud, let's see what that looks like. And what I'm going to use is a brand new trial org. So in the same way, if you today went and created a trial org from this link, this is what you're going to see. So we're in something called the Service Console within Salesforce. And the Service Console, you can think of that as its own application that's very much all about customer cases, so customer support. Salesforce is a pretty big platform, so you're probably in the future or even today have multiple different applications or ways to use your data. Service Console is built into the trial orgs, and it's a kind of one-stop shop place where you're going to take your team, you're going to be answering customer cases. So when you first log on to the into your trial org, you're probably going to see this trial onboarding page. Feel free to go through that. There's some good videos on what's included in here and sort of how you can use this. So you can always come back to that if you forget what I've covered today. So this trial onboarding link here. And then all of your cases are going to live under the Cases tab. So let's do a little tour here of what we're seeing. If you guys are familiar with the desk filters, this here is called list views, and that's basically your replacement for filters. I have a few built into the trial org. I can pin certain list views, and that allows me to come back here and see that particular list view next time. And then I can always create other ones. In a similar way to desk filters, list views allow you to choose what types of cases are shown in each view. So this little funnel icon here tells me that, oh, I'm actually showing all cases, which is exactly what I want because this one is named all cases. But then if I wanted to add additional conditions, maybe I want all cases, but maybe not the ones that are closed, I can go and further refine that. And in this scenario, I can say case status equals, and let's make that new open and pending. I'll hit done, hit save, and there I would only see those case statuses that don't include the resolved or closed status. So that basically should be very similar to what you guys did in Desk with your filters. The big change, probably a pretty positive change, is that you don't have to be an admin to actually see that. Anybody that's an agent can click to see what the filter conditions are. So it's really clear of what's included and what's not. A couple other things that are unique and different, you can actually create little reports and charts right into this list view. So that way, if you have a lot of cases in a particular list view, you can create a quick little graph. And one of the things I really like is you can actually change the fields that you see on the column headings here. So in Desk, we didn't have the ability to change those column headings, but here we do. And you can basically click Select Fields to Display, drag in any fields that maybe are your custom fields that are important for you to see. And let's just put a few fields in here. Let's just do this, maybe some escalations. Let's see if those are going to be important for us. I'm not going to have a lot of data in this particular trial org because it's pretty fresh, but as you can see, once you start using Service Cloud, you can start really figuring out what makes sense to you and your team. Okay, so that's the high level of list views. You can create new list views. You can clone these ones and maybe modify a few things. You can rename them. You have different sharing settings. You can edit the filters. That's what I just showed you with that funnel icon, and select fields to display. You can also delete list views, and I would say in the whole Desk to Service Cloud migration, if you have something that was brought over from Desk, probably a good idea to delete that after you've done your final data migration. Otherwise, it'll get recreated again. But just know that you can actually delete them from here as well. Okay, and now you're probably wondering, well, okay, I see all my cases. What do I do next? So if you want to start working on a case, you'll be clicking on the case numbers. And if you want to see the person, you're going to click on the actual name. So we'll do this a little bit briefly. So when I click on the case number, it's going to open up what's called the case object. And this is a customization that comes with a trial org. So if you have an existing org, it's probably going to look a lot different, but you can make it look like this. You'll be working cases with email. You can log calls. If you do plan on doing any social media, you can actually have replies go right through here. Case comments are the equivalent of notes in Desk. And then post feature, this is kind of unique. It's a combination of internal notes and something called chatter. So you can mention anybody else in your Salesforce instance. And then they would get a note, a notification, and it would also be added to your case timeline. So you can kind of see any interactions that happened. And you can also change the owner of the case. Email-wise, you can actually reply back to the customer using a couple different methods. You can free type, hi there. You can reply the answer. You can use something called quick text that Suzanne's going to cover later on today. So this is an example one where it has just some canned text, including a liquid variable, so you can dynamically pull information. Let's replace that. So that gave me this line. And you can also use macros, which are basically the macros that you're comfortable and familiar with in Salesforce, in Desk. So you can recreate them as well. So macros live on this thing called a utility bar, and you can create them in the same way that you had in Desk. Once you send your email, it's going to be added to the case timeline, so you can always see the interactions in the same way that you had with Desk. And other things that are probably good to know on the right-hand side, if you do use case articles, This knowledge area is something that'll be really useful for your agents, so you can actually insert articles into cases in the same way you had with Desk. So if you do have support articles that you're using today, run the migration wizard. It'll pull everything over and you'll be able to see your support articles, which are just going to be called knowledge articles in Salesforce, right along here. So other couple quick notes here. Case details shows you a summary of the case details. If you do have a lot of them, most of them are going to feed over to this details section here. So anything that you brought over from Desk should show up here. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do to change the look and feel of this page. The quick preview of that is I'm going to click the gear icon, the top right here, and I can click this thing called Edit Object. That's going to shortcut me to the case object in Salesforce. So that'd be similar in Desk. If I go to the admin settings, I click cases, and then if you also used next-gen case page layouts, it's the same idea. You can click on a case layout, and you can actually move all of your fields around. You can remove them off the page completely. It gives you the ability to really change the look and feel of where all your fields live, and you can more easily organize it so your team knows exactly what they need to fill out. So you can create sections. Let's say this is called very important. I'll just click OK. Maybe I want to grab in the description and let's see the subject field, and this could be any custom fields you create. I'll hit save, and once you save the case page layout, you can come back into your case, hit refresh, and from here we should see the new and refreshed section. So let's go click on details, and I have that new very important section. So basically, think of this as a canvas that's really for you to design and make it exactly what you want for your team. All right, so with that, we talked about planning your move and the high-level service console walkthrough. I'll go ahead and hand it off to Patrick right now, and he's going to take us through how we actually start getting data from Desk into Salesforce. So Patrick, if you want to, I think you can take presenter role, or do I have to give it over?
Perfect. I think I can just take it. Let me see here. And good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're from. So I'll go ahead and I believe I can now, everyone can see my screen, correct? All right, we'll go ahead and Barb, can you see it okay?
Oh yeah, I was just saying, yeah, it was a little bit delayed.
Oh, perfect, perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and first bring up our slides here. So we have, let's talk a little bit about data migration here of where we can find the actual wizard itself. So we can talk about this live, but just if you are looking at these slides maybe afterwards and you're curious how do we exactly get here, we'll click on the app launcher and then we'll go ahead and click on the desk migration wizard right here. It should come up like this. So let's go ahead and do that here in my sandbox environment or my demo trial environment. So as it currently stands, all I've done so far is I have logged into my Salesforce instance. And we'll go ahead and click on this up here in the upper left, which is called the app launcher. And when this comes up here, it will show our desk migration wizard right here. And we click on this right here. My apologies, I'm fighting off a bit of a cold at the moment. So when we went ahead and clicked on that desk migration wizard there in our app launcher, we'll be asked right here of, migration wizard, here's the tool. Do we want to select our case migration or our article migration? And you'll see a little warning right here. And this is, if you see this, this doesn't mean you're doing anything necessarily wrong. This is just saying, hey, this looks like it's a production environment. If you're coming over from Desk to a brand new trial instance of Salesforce, there's no real need to run it in a sandbox. If you're coming over from desk to an existing Salesforce instance, meaning that you were a desk customer and you had within your company, and now you're going to put both of them together, you'll definitely want to use a sandbox first. If you see all these green check marks right here, you should be good to go. But if you see a red X, again, you didn't do anything wrong on your end. More so just you'll need to look into this documentation link right here. And that'll be your next guiding steps there. So let's talk a little bit about the data migration as far as what goes from here. So as we talked about this, when should we use this tool? If we have articles and cases we want to bring over. Now, with that being said, as Barb said earlier, if you have 500,000 or less cases that you're bringing over, this tool can work for you. If you have more than that, there's two options you can kind of go down. You can either use bring over a smaller selection of case data. So maybe instead of everything of all time, you're now going to go ahead and bring over maybe just your past year of data or 2 years, depending upon how many cases you have coming in. We talked a little bit about where do we find the tool, this data migration wizard, and you'll find this automatically installed if you're going from desk to a brand new trial instance of Salesforce. However, if you are coming from desk to an existing Salesforce instance, you'll want to go ahead and install this tool first in your sandbox to do testing. Or also to, let's say, so that'd be, this link right here would be to install the actual migration wizard. And also this can update this right here. So if you see this link right, it looks a little weird, but if you're curious of how do we use it, what we'll do here is we'll copy this link right here, everything just exactly like this right here. And in order to install it, we need to erase everything past. If we look up here in our URL up here, we can go ahead and select everything past .com. We can press backspace there, and we can paste that in and make sure it's all one URL. And we click enter here. We'll go ahead and get asking us if we want to go ahead and install, or if you already have this installed, there's an update. So as you can see, there is an update since I've last done this, so I can upgrade right here or install this in your sandbox environment. So that's how you install the package if you, or the migration wizard if you needed to. A couple different common errors that you may see. So let's say we're running the migration tool and there's a couple common errors in what they could mean. There's field differences, meaning that we were calling one field maybe the name field in desk, but maybe now this is called case name in Salesforce. So that could be a differential of where the data should be migrated to. You may also see a match already found error, which means that if I have a company called Patrick's Bakery, which is an account in desk and my Salesforce instance, you'll get that error message if the account name or contact name already exists in Salesforce. And if that happens, it just means that, again, you didn't do anything wrong necessarily. It just means that Salesforce can't, or the desk migration wizard can't recreate that data in your instance because of that. Validation rules. This specifically would be guided more towards those of you who are going from desk to an existing Salesforce instance. And what this means is that if a field's required in Salesforce to be filled out before a case can be saved, it means that if that field didn't exist in desk, you're not satisfying that requirement, so your data would fail to come over. Storage here also would be something to look into. So going back to the example, let's say we have 1 million cases that being brought over. You have, I believe, the trial environment has around 10 gigabytes worth of data. If you have, let's say, 100 gigabytes to bring over worth of data, unfortunately, you're not able to bring everything over until either A, you purchase more storage from Salesforce, or B, we bring over a smaller amount of data. And there's no, unfortunately, real error message we can give in the data migration wizard other than going to your Salesforce instance and seeing if maybe you exceeded your storage limits. And the permissions spot right down here is going to talk about, you have to make sure you're a system administrator in Salesforce and also have the appropriate permissions in Desk as well. So if at any time too, this last point right down here is the audit and admin features. If we go back over here to my demo environment, when we want to see like, hey, what kind of migrations did we do before in the past? What succeeded? What failed? There's a couple different tools up top here. We can click on Desk Migrations right here, and we can check on all the different migrations we've done before in my demo environment. We can see over here in this Desk Migration record right here, it shows that we brought over 61 accounts next, and it gives us a little bit more information about everything that was brought over. On the administration tools side of things, for some reason, let's say, hey, we want to delete all of the Desk data we brought over. Maybe we have a storage issue that we had, or maybe something was updated in Desk that's really valuable for us to have in Salesforce. You can choose specific objects right here in Salesforce and then click the delete all button or delete selected. Same things will go with articles as well. And then also too, we can do a record audit right here. And it'll talk about more so about different information that was brought over from companies, the desk count, and also how many accounts with Salesforce and the differential percentage right there. So if we do have more than 500,000 cases, what are our next steps? What do we do? Your next step, most likely, if it absolutely is a requirement to bring everything over, would be to talk about using Data Loader. Data Loader is a tool I'd like to say is great powers comes great responsibilities type of situation, where yes, you can insert mass amounts of data and you can update mass amounts of data. But if you're not familiar with it, I would always say it's best to test on a smaller group of data in a sandbox and before using this tool. So we're not going to have too much time, unfortunately, today to talk about Data Loader itself, but just know it's out there, and if you do need it, it's here. So in the handouts that's there for you, there's a help article right here of how to install it. What are the requirements? There's a trailhead right here that you can use in order to learn more about the tool. And there's also 2 videos right here of inserting case records and updating case records that would talk about a quick video on how to do both of those as well. So continuing onwards here, let's talk a little bit more about automation. So let's say we've got the data side of things working out here, and now we're curious if we want to recreate our desk rules. Desk had a great way of doing that, but we want to be able to recreate that within Salesforce. So let's first talk a little bit about the different kinds of automation. This might be a little bit overwhelming at first, but I would say is that if we kind of talk about everything first, then we'll demo and show some screenshots. It might make more sense. So the first one here is case assignment rules. A case assignment rule, just like our auto response rules, you'll hear it being said of you can only have one rule active at a time. And yes, technically that's true, but you can have multiple rules that assist that one active rule. And we'll kind of talk about that in a screenshot here momentarily. It's not visual or time-based. It doesn't create records or delete records, but it does send email alerts out when an agent is assigned to a case, if that's set up that way. For workflow rules, this is workflow rules, process builder, and flow builder. I would say a lot of the times, if something's getting complex, if something's a little bit difficult to think about, at the end of the day, remember the golden rule of a lot of automation is if and then. If the following criteria happens, then what should happen? Workflow rules here, we'll have a demo here momentarily about how to create one. It's a single if and then statement. It can be time-based, it can create task records, and it can send out emails. Process builder, when we say multiple if and then, we can say, if the following happens, then this should happen. But if the first part didn't happen, let's try the second part, and then we can have multiple if and thens from there. And then lastly here is flow builder. We're not going to talk about this one too much, but just know that if you are coming from desk to a trial instance of Salesforce, that there are flow builders and process builders in your instances They do get pretty complex, and you can do a lot with them. But I would say it'd be a little bit outside the scope of this masterclass here. If you're curious of all the capabilities, because this is a very generalized thing right here, that we can find a complete table right here if you want to look at that afterwards as well. So configuring rules. Let's take a step back here and talk a little about the case assignment rules. The first one we talked about here. We talked about how we could have a single rule that's active and then multiple things that can support it. So for an example, let's see if I can zoom in here a little bit. It doesn't look like I can for some reason. So let's talk a little bit about it. We can say if the case origin is email number 1 and it's new, then we're going to assign it to this general queue. If the case origin, where the cases are coming in from, their email address, then we want to assign it to a different queue instead. So ultimately, we're saying we have one rule up here, one main rule, but there's multiple things that can support that one main active rule. You can assign it cases to specific users, or you can assign it over to specific queues. It's kind of up to you what works best for you and your team. And moving on a little bit more here, we'll talk about workflow rules of one object and simplicity, and then also process builder 2, which can be multiple objects and more complexity. So workflow, I always like to think of the golden rule here is if something happens, then what should happen? And it's with a single object. If the following happens, then what should happen? So let's go ahead and look at a demo environment. And let's get back to right where I was with, oops, go back to Service Console. If I just logged in, the very first time I've logged into my Salesforce instance here, I want to go ahead and create a workflow rule. How do I do it? So what I'm going to do here is, if you haven't done this before, and you are a system administrator for this, you'll click the gear up here in the upper right-hand corner and click Setup. And then once Setup comes up here, in the quick find window right here, we're going to go ahead and type in workflow. And you'll see a couple different things pop up here, but let's go ahead and click on workflow rules. And when this loads up here, we will click on a new rule. And the very first thing it asks us is, what object should this be related to? Because we're all very familiar with the case object coming from desk, that's where I would start off if I were you, is the case object. So we'll go ahead and click next. And we'll name the rule here All-In-One Masterclass. Description right here, we'll talk about, it's kind of more so for behind the scenes of just so other admins know what is this exactly. And you'll see different rule criteria too, of created every time it's edited, and created at any time it's edited, subsequently meet criteria. Usually I just use the first two, which created means only run this rule when everything first comes in. The second one would be more so every single time the case is created and it's also edited, the record's edited and then saved. And the third one here would be based upon only save this or run this automation rule again if it's created, it's edited, and also meets the following criteria. So for this rule here, let's just go with created. And let's first say, and I wish I could make this drop-down menu here a little bit bigger, but I can't. But just so you know here, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab the case status field. And so we'll say if the case's status and the operator equals, and since this is a pick list field, we'll click on the little magnifying glass right there. And we'll say new. And the case origin, which is set up where whenever a case is created, I have the following email set up. If the case's origin is one of my two email addresses, which is Patrick Bagel and Patrick Cupcake, then what should happen? So this is almost like step 2 is almost like the if portion. We'll talk more about a summary at the very end of what all this means. So if the case's status is new and the case's origin equals Patrick Bagel, or that's what comma means right there, Patrick Cupcake, then what should happen? We have two options here of either immediate workflow actions or time dependent. What do we want immediately to happen? Let's go ahead and update this this field automatically. Let's see, to 1120. And the field to update here is we want to have it set up so the priority field is then changed to a high value, and we'll click save. So we could definitely add on other things here if we wanted to edit and automate other fields to be updating when this criteria is met, or we could have time-dependent actions, such as we could have emails being sent out 72 hours later, or updating a case if it's not looked into in a timely manner. We can definitely do that as well. So we'll click done right here. And I know this is a really, really brief overview, but ultimately what it says here is this is almost like the summary. It's not active yet, as we can tell right here from this field. We can see the criteria of if the case's status equals new and the case origin equals patrickbagel1920@gmail.com or patrickcupcake1920@gmail.com, what should happen? The immediate workflow action should be it updates this field, which we specified right here. So if this looks correct to us, we can go ahead and click the activate button. And if everyone would like to email this address, I'll put down here in chat. Feel free to say hello or something like that, just so we can make sure our automation works. And then I can refresh here to make sure that comes in and looks correctly here. And what we'll plan on doing next here is what we'll do is we'll talk about Masterclass, or Masterclass Process Builder real briefly, and then just to make sure we have everything that we need here.
Patrick, I'm sending you an email right now, so it may take a minute or two to come in.
Sure. Thank you for sending that over. And I always like to say too, is that while we're waiting for that email to come through, is there's similarities between Desk and Service Cloud when we're working on automation, but just know that I don't think that there's, it's always good to get others than just yourself working on to test out your automation. Things may be thought of real easily to think of, hey, this is how we want it, this is how it should be. But then when we do get someone else involved who has never really done this before, it's always a really good idea to get someone else's like, hey, this is how I would do this. Perfect. So first email right here. Thank you for sending that in. Let's double check. So our case being here, hello, it's assigned to me, and the priority is listed as high, which is great. And it happened because, again, our case's status was equal to new. It was the Patrick Bagel address was emailed. So the if and then statements were then done appropriately. So thank you for doing that. Excellent. So from here, just to kind of wrap things up, and I do have like that if and then type of thought process right over here in a screenshot if you are looking into this later. But just to kind of more wrap up on my side of things, we talked a little bit about Process Builder of multiple if and then statements. If the first part didn't qualify, then what should happen? And it also allows us to use multiple objects. So let's say we wanted to say, starting on the case, if someone emails us on the case record, we also want to make updates on the account or the contact. You may want to look into using Process Builder. And there are also processes that are found in your trial environment if you are going to a new Salesforce instance. This would be an example right here of we started off on the case object right here, which is that's where the object is shown right there, and the node, as it's called right here, is that this diamond shape right here, and it's saying that if this is true, if this criteria in this node right here is true, then we're going to do the following things. If it's false, then we can either add criteria right here to have another if and then statement. But since we don't, it would just ultimately just be ignored. So perfect. So I want to go ahead and thank you for your time, everyone. For my portion here, I know I went through a lot there. So if you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the question box, and I'll pass it over to Suzanne to talk about macros and quick text.
Thank you so much, Patrick. So what I'll do, we went through a lot of information and we still have a while to go. So feel free to stand up and stretch for a little bit while I take back these presenter rights here. And I'll go ahead and share my screen here on my end.
That's a great note to stretch even on our end,
yeah.
too.
It's a long session, so just to make sure that everyone is still with us and awake and listening into the content. All right, so a couple of things on what we're going to talk about. We still have a few topics to go, so I'll be covering a little bit around macros, quick text. We'll talk about email setup. We'll talk about testing your configuration, cutover, so the live cutover, we'll touch on that as well. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about troubleshooting and resources. And then after that, we'll open it up to questions. So I'll do my best to make sure that we cover all the content that we intended to cover today. And just as Patrick did, I will be hopping into my org briefly to showcase a couple of things in between the slides. So before we go ahead and get started, again, if you have questions, we're going to try to park the questions to the end, but if there's anything pressing, you can put them in the questions panel and Barb and Patrick will help me cover those. So first up here is macros and quick text. So we talked about the rules for automation. We talked about the service console in general. So some of the things that you most likely will need to reconfigure in Service Cloud would be canned responses in some way. And those can be done, it can be done in multiple ways. You can represent canned replies in more than one way in Service Cloud. The most commonly used one would be macros, which are very similar and equivalent to macros that we have in Desk. And then in addition to that, we have that quick text feature that Barb covered briefly in the very beginning. So before we talk about the main use cases for these two, I just wanted to showcase this table here, giving you a brief summary of the differences between quick text, knowledge, and macros, because all three of these functionalities, you all have them as part of the Service Console in your org, and you have them all pretty much covering similar functionality, but not quite the same. So brief summary between these three. The quick text is the simpler version. Quick texts are, in general, very easy to set up, very quick to use, and it's mainly used for very short messaging. So think greetings, quick change of signatures, just a very brief couple of sentences where you don't have the need to incorporate any attachments or images with that text. No need to link to anything. Not really any need to have any formatting done in that quick text, just a very simple, brief message that is a few sentences long. So that's what you would want to use quick text for. If you want to take that one step further, you can make use of knowledge articles, which is your content section. So you have content in desk.com called articles. In Service Cloud, the equivalence is knowledge articles. You can use the same thing here, again, presenting either short messaging or longer text. So if you feel that you have more than just a few sentences to present, you want to present more of a longer guide, maybe a how-to guide or an FAQ, a longer instruction. And in addition to the longer text, you also want to incorporate images and attachments. then you can use knowledge articles. So it can allow for those additional parts that quick text cannot do. So you can include images, attachments, and have more text included. The character limit is much longer. If you want to take that one step further, that's when you get to macros. So macros can pretty much do all of that plus a little bit more. So you would take it one step further. You can have short or longer text. You can include images, attachments, or not. And in addition to all of that, you can also update case fields. So as your macro is running, you can both insert your text and your images, and along with that, tweak a case field or two and be able to make those updates all in one click. So some of the most common use cases for this would be setting status to resolved and maybe updating a case field to whichever value you would want to put it in, instead of having that manual change of case fields. So just a very high level difference here between the two. And with that, leading into this next slide, there is a video linked in the deck. We did notice that it's not clickable, obviously, from the PDF. So I've included the links to any videos that I have on these slides. We've included them in the email that will be sent to you after the session. So if you're more of a visual learner, please take a look at that video. It's a more thorough walkthrough of how you can go about building both quick text and macros. But just for the sake of today's session, looking at macros first here, the macros are mainly used to save time. If you're looking for that solution that will allow your agents to not complete so many repetitive tasks manually, but trying to automate that, then yes, you can use rules similar to the ones that Patrick showcased, but you can also use macros in addition to rules, or instead of, it just depends on your use case. So it's a way to be able to complete multiple tasks in one click. And with that, you would also save that time. And with macros, again, very similar to in Desk, the main use case is to send a canned response, sending out that quick email reply. But in Service Cloud, what you can also do in addition to that is you can send out a template. So if you don't want to send out a quick reply, you want to send out a longer template with more text, you can append that to your macro and send that out. And then, as I said, you can update case fields, which is something that you can't do with quick text, and that's what makes macros a very special feature and a very, very commonly used one. It's great for efficiency in general. So I'll be hopping into my org here briefly to showcase how a macro can be built. But before that, really brief on quick text. I did mention that they are easier to set up, so I'm going to try to focus on macros specifically today. But with quick text, the main use case here is brief messages. If you have very short greetings, but you are aware of that, you cannot cram in too many characters there. There is a character limit. Then quick text might just be the easier way for you to get this set up in Service Cloud. So before I move forward here, let me exit out of the slides briefly and log into my demo org here. So what we're going to do, again, just briefly to make sure that we're providing a high level, but still showcasing how this is actually done, I'm going to go ahead and just recreate one of my desk macros. So I have my desk site open here. And in my desk site, I have a really simple macro called cupcakes. So if we open up this cupcake macro to review what it actually does, it is saved into a folder called cupcakes. And if I scroll down here to see the actions that the cupcake macro is doing, let me see, I have a lot of fields in here. So a couple of the actions that the macro is completing, it is setting the priority to critical. It is assigning the group. So the case owner will be set in a certain way when this macro runs. So specifically when this macro is run, we want to set it to the cupcake support team. And then we have a quick reply. And this is, in this case, is just a couple of sentences, but this is what we want to insert into our case reply so that our agents don't have to manually type it out. So we're going to go ahead and recreate this. I'm going to scroll all the way up and I'm going to copy the label and go back to Service Cloud. So make it a little bit larger. So the first thing that we actually want to do here is to create the folder called Cupcakes, because I did want to organize my macros in folders. So I want to have that folder structure. So in order to do that, I will select this little drop down at the top here and select macros. And this is optional. You don't have to organize your macros in folders, but if you do, you would do it from here. So in this section, you'll see there's an all folder section where you can see that I have 2 folders at the moment. And there's a button up here at the top right for new folder. And you want to make sure you're creating these folders before you create your macros, because when you're creating the macros, it will ask you where you want to save the macros. So you ideally want to have the folders already created. So I'll enter Cupcakes as the name of my folder, and that is all I need to do. So it just automatically moves me into this Cupcake folder, and I currently have no macros saved in here. So if I do click back to the all folder view, you'll see my newly created Cupcake folder in here. So that was step 1. So I'm going to go X out of here and open up a case. And in this case, I'm able to select the macros from the utility bar at the bottom left. And I have 3 macros all together at the moment. And I can change my view in here to see my folders, if it's easier for you to see how many macros you have saved into each folder. So I'm going to keep this view up here. My Cupcake folder has no macros. So let's go ahead and create it. I'm going to click this little plus sign at the top here. And we're going to give it its name. We're going to give it the Cupcake name. And here's what I select my folder. So I'm going to select that Cupcake folder that I just created. Select that here. Perfect. So now my macro will be saved in the Cupcake folder. And I'm just going to go ahead and click Save. So our macro has pretty much, we have created it, but it's empty. There's pretty much nothing in here. So in order to open up the macro builder and add our tasks and actions to it real quick, we'll click this Edit Instruction button at the top here. And it will automatically open up the macro builder for us in a completely separate browser tab. And this is just a default, so it doesn't change anything on your actual macro. The macro is still here on the secondary tab, but it's empty. So in the macro builder, this is where we're going to add all our actions. So let's refresh our memory real quick on what we needed this macro to do. So this macro was doing the following actions. Priority needs to be high. Ownership needs to go to the Cupcake queue. And this is my quick reply. So I'm going to go ahead and save this quick reply here so that I have it copied. And let's start with priority and the assignment. So in the macro builder, on the left side here, this is what we call the canvas. Anything that is highlighted in blue, when I'm hovering over it, this means that it is clickable. And if it's clickable, it means I'm allowed to use it in my macro. So in order to set priority and ownership, those 2 fields are available in this top left corner for case detail. So if I click that blue highlighted section once, it will open it up for me and allow those fields to become clickable. And if you notice on the right side, the instructions panel will automatically update everything for me. So you don't have to do anything on the right side. It will just add anything I click on will add it for me under the instructions tab, which you'll find here on the top right. So on the left side, now that these fields are now clickable for me, I'll select the priority field and click on that once. And when I do so, it's added for me on the right side. And then I'm going to select the case owner field once, because I did want to change the ownership. And I'm going to click Save. Clicking Save seals that section and closes it up again so that it's again highlighted in blue. So that just seals my fields and saves them on the right side. So now what I've done is I've added 2 fields, priority and ownership. And now I'm just going to go ahead and give them the values that I want to set in my macros. So my first action was to set priority to high. So I'll go ahead and select that. My second action was to set ownership to the cupcake team. So the cupcake team is a queue that I have in my org. So I'll select queue rather than selecting an individual agent. And if I type out cupcake here, I do have a cupcake support team queue, and I'm going to go ahead and select it here. So these are my two first action. If you want to save in between, you can hit the save to make sure you don't lose the actions that you've added. So this leaves us with one final task, and that is to add our quick reply. So this macro is both editing case fields and it's appending an email reply. So to add your email reply, what you want to do is click the email tab in the middle here on the canvas, the one named email, and it will open up the email editor for you. When it's done opening up the editor, you want to click the big body field here. Click it once. And again, you'll notice that on the right side, it adds that field for me automatically. So here I can now enter my text that I would like to use as my email response. And I had already copied it from my desk macro, so I'm going to go ahead and paste it in here. So here's my text. I'm going to go ahead and shorten it a little bit so that it's not too long, so that you can see the full text. So my text is very simple. Thank you for your email. And then I have a little bit snippet here for order number, and then letting them know that we're going to notify them, and then we're done. This is my quick text. So I'm going to go ahead and save and show you what this macro looks like. So I'll close, you can X out of this browser tab entirely to close it out and go back to the service console. I'm going to do a quick refresh so I can see my brand new macro actions. So my macro now has two actions. It's setting priority, it's setting the ownership, and it has an actual email reply and verbiage. So at any time now, if I would like to test it, I would simply have my case open, whichever case I would like to use for this test, click the macro section, and in that cupcake folder, I can select my cupcake macro. And all you need to do is click on it and then run a macro. And it would just automatically run through and check off each of those actions that we added. So as you can see here, it gives you sort of a checklist to confirm that we set the priority to high, we changed the ownership to cupcake, and we added the email response for you. And if you want to confirm on the actual case, you can check to see that the priority was indeed set to high, the ownership was changed, and our email response was added as well. And one final note here, if you do want to beautify the actual text, you can throw in a couple of break tags if you would like to break it up into multiple paragraphs. That's something that you can just do in that actual email reply area inside the macro. So you can add in break tags to pre-format it if you want it looking nice and pretty when you're running the macro. So that covers the macro piece. The quick text, I'm not going to walk into too much detail here out of respect for time, but all you need to know about quick text really, because they're so simple to set up. As Barb pointed out, you have the icon here at the top. Clicking on it will allow you to either select any of these pre-configured quick texts, or you can simply, again, click this plus sign. So very similar to the macro, clicking that plus sign would allow you to create your own quick text. And it's really simple. You just need to give it a name, and you're typing in your brief message in here, and then you save it. So it's really simple. It just takes a couple of seconds. So if I want to add my sample text here, and my text is really brief. I'm just going to say, hello, hi. That's my brief message. If I save that and go back to my case, my quick text has been created. Here's the text that I entered. All I have to do is click that the actual title of the quick text, and it would just insert it for me. So again, a really simple setup in comparison with macros, and something that might be right for you if you don't have a very complex setup in Desk.com. All right, so that was all about quick text and macros. Do let me know if there are any questions. Patrick and Barb can help answer those. While we do that, let me dive right into the next topic, which is email. So we're going to go ahead and keep this really simple, not spend too much time on this actual slide, but we're going to go into my demo org and set up an email address. So what I'm going to do at a very high level, I'll be using the email setup wizard. I'll show you how to use it. I'll show you where you can find your mailbox after using it. And I'll show you a neat little trick on how you can set a default case owner when adding your mailbox. And again, there's a video walkthrough here of the entire process that is already pre-recorded, and the link to that video will be shared in an email later on. So with that, let me go back to my service console and let's go ahead and do a quick addition here. So if you want to follow along, please feel free. If you're on the service console, first thing you want to do is navigate to the service setup. So there are two setup areas. You specifically want to select that purple service setup. And the reason for that is these wizards that you can use for Service Cloud setup, they are only visible in that specific homepage. So select service setup. And on this homepage, you'll want to click this connect your support email. So I'm going to click that once, and it's going to help me add my mailbox here. I have a demo mailbox that we're going to go ahead and connect. We're going to do that in 4 steps. So to get started, first, I have to select what type of mailbox this is. So I happen to have a Gmail mailbox, so I'll select the Gmail one here. If you have any other provider, you just select the other option to the right. And enter the actual email address. So my address is Yummy Cupcakes of Brooklyn, very long, at gmail.com. So this is my email address and the one that I want to connect. So once I've entered that, I will move on to the next screen. And here's when you can actually pre-configure a few settings. The first one I want to showcase is the sender display name. So the one who appears as the sender, in this case, I want it to appear as the Cupcake support team, so that whenever I send out an email from this address, the Cupcake support team is the name that appears, the label that appears as the sender. I'm going to leave everything as is. Case priority, I'll leave that as medium. Task status, I'll leave that as not started. It's not something I need to modify at this point. Origin, I'm going to leave that as email as well. And here's what I meant by setting the default ownership. So you actually get this question. Do you want to default a specific owner for this address? So what that means is, if a case comes in from this particular Cupcake address, where would you want to route that case right away? So I actually have a queue for the Cupcake support team. I would like that to be my default owner. So what will happen is every time someone emails that address, the case is automatically redirected to a list view that I have for that Cupcake queue. So if I go back to my service console here, I have a list view for the Cupcake support team. And this list view is configured to only display cases where the Cupcake support team is the owner of these cases. So that way I'm actually taking care of that routing of cases automatically on this email level. So this is a great trick and a really nice way of just automating that without having to use a rule for that assignment. So I'm happy with how things look here. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And the wizard is now going to give me a set of instructions. So it's asking me to log into my Cupcake address, and it's asking me to verify. So there's a link that will be sent to me in an email to that address, and I need to click it to verify. So I have that address open in a secondary browser here. So let me see if it will showcase. We'll go ahead and swap the screen. So you can see my secondary screen here. So on my other screen here, I have my Cupcake mailbox. And in Gmail, it has sent me an email where it's asking me to verify that this is indeed my mailbox. And this is the verification link, this very lengthy link here inside the email. I need to click that link to confirm to be able to continue on with the wizard. So I'm going to click that very long link, and it's going to thank you for verifying, and that is it. So now we're going to go back to the wizard, and it's asking me to check this box if I have clicked that verification link, which I have. So we're going to confirm that we have done that and move on to the next step. On this next page, it's now providing me with additional instructions. So now I have to copy this lengthy string here that it's providing me with. I'm going to click copy, and I need to navigate back to my mailbox and add a forwarding address to this long string that I was provided. So it's giving me exact instructions on what I have to do, and when I'm done with that, I need to check this off to say that I'm done. So what I'll do is I'll switch my screen back and go back to my mailbox here. So what you need to do after this is once you're in your mailbox, you will need to select settings. So I happen to be a Gmail. You will most likely have a very similar setting option in your own mailbox if you happen to use another email provider. In Gmail, you'll go to settings and you'll see the forwarding option here. So the forwarding is where we need to connect this long string that we were provided with by the wizard, connected to our mailbox to allow cases to be created from this address. So at the top here, it says forwarding, and there's a button here called add a forwarding address. So I'm going to click that once, and here is where I copy in the forwarding address. And the forwarding address is that long string that the wizard provided me with. I had copied it, so I'm going to go ahead and paste it in and click next. And now it is telling me that it's going to go ahead and forward to this address. Do I want to proceed? I'm going to confirm. And it's now letting me know that in order to complete this step fully, they have sent me a confirmation code to that long string. And that is what I need to do. I need to find that email and type in my confirmation code here in my mailbox. So that email with the confirmation code should be found in your service console now. So I will swap back. I apologize, there's a lot of back and forth, but I want to make sure that you all know and understand how that process would work. So I'm going to go to my main list view here and make sure that I've refreshed. And the very first email at the top here is the one I want to look at. It's called Gmail forwarding confirmation. So if I open up that case, there should be a code for me in the actual body of the case. So here is the confirmation code, and you have to copy that code and go back to the mailbox and paste that in to complete the step fully. So going back to my mailbox, there's an area where I can actually type in that code. I will save it and click verify, and that is all you need to do to connect your mailbox. So now that that is done, now the routing is complete. And to be able to check to see, now the question, we get this question a lot, where do I actually see my mailbox now that I completed those steps and I've actually finished the wizard? The first thing you're going to do is check off to say that you're done with that step. And we did confirm the pop-up. So if you click here, you can open up a pop-up to confirm that you did in fact complete all the steps in the forwarding process. So if you click here, you can confirm that you've completed the steps. I know it looks very small on the screen, but there's a little confirm button that you need to complete from here to close out that process entirely and complete the wizard to say that you are done. And what I want to do here, now that we're done with the full forwarding setup here, and we've saved our changes on the other side, they will actually send you a test email to confirm that you did add your mailbox correctly. So you want to make sure that you get an okay from the wizard confirming that this was fully done. And while it's doing that, because it might take a little bit of time, and I know that we still have a few things to talk about, I'm going to X out of here to show you where you can find your mailbox. So after completing that wizard, you can navigate to the email to case section. And email to case, when you search for this, if you scroll all the way down, you will now see your new address under the routing address section. So you'll see that I've added my Yummy Cupcakes of Brooklyn. It's added here and it's showing as verified. All right, so that was a really quick walkthrough. Let me hop back to where we were. And let's move over to the next topic. So we've talked about rules, we've talked about macros, we've talked about quick text, we've talked about adding your mailbox. Once you're done with most of these items, it's time to actually prep for the go live. And this is a big step. So we do have a pre-recorded video of a couple of things that you may want to look over for this, but on a very high level and a summary of things that you would want to test. And our recommendation is that you, as Patrick mentioned, have someone help you test this step. Test your emails. So what we were just looking at, test after adding your mailbox, test sending emails in and test sending emails out of your service console, and just confirm that that communication back and forth is working for you. Second is automation. So the rules that Patrick was covering, make sure that you activate the rules and test that they're actually triggering. So make sure you're actually checking if the criteria is being found true and the actions are being completed. And I had an example that I was going to show, but Patrick already showed you one example on how to trigger a workflow rule. So I'm not going to hop into that to save a little bit of time. But make sure that you're fully testing out your automations, specifically if you're using workflow rules or assignment rules where you need to route cases in a certain way or set the ownership in a certain way, and if that is a big part of your current case management process. And third, and this is part of the testing really, it's sometimes overlooked, the service console in itself. So all the pieces that Barb covered in the very beginning of the session, you want to know where those macros are found. You want to know where the articles are available and how to use them in an email response. And you want to make sure that you understand what all the tabs in the console mean, when to use them, and make sure that you fully understand the cycle of case management from receiving a brand new case, assigning it to yourself, to be able to respond, maybe collaborate with your team, and then fully resolving that case. So we highly recommend that you use a couple of sample cases to emulate that full process from beginning to end so that you know and you feel fully confident on how Service Console is actually used. This is really important before the go live, because once you have Cutover and you are live in Service Cloud, you might not want to test that out when you're actually in a live environment and cases are flowing in continuously. Once you're done with that testing phase, you want to also make sure that you're including your team. So you're not going to be the only one most likely working on these cases. You may have a team of agents, and whether you have a very large team of agents of 10 people helping you out on the console, or if you have maybe just one or two other agents, it's very important that you include them and that you train them so that they can use Service Cloud as well. As an administrator, you may have spent a lot of time configuring the org and you've played around with all the tabs and clicked around on all the buttons, and maybe you understand how Service Cloud is working, but you want to make sure you also allow your agents to learn how to do that. So we're linking to a couple of really helpful resources that cover both adoption, teaching them how to use the console and adopting the platform, since it is brand new and most likely very different from what they've experienced in Desk. And there's a few Trailhead units that were really highly recommended that could be really helpful to use for your team of agents. All right, so taking a deep breath here. So now that we covered all that, you should be somewhere along the line where you're ready for the go live. So the go live in itself, it's a very large topic. It can't really be covered in just 5 minutes. So I highly recommend that you watch our video. It's pre-recorded and it's about an hour of content that covers the full cutover process from the beginning to the preparation phase to the actual cutover to the actual post cutover process. And again, those links will be available in an email sent out to you. But on a high level, here's what the cutover is all about. The sample cutover that I have on the screen is an example of how you can visualize the actual cutover process. So most likely one of the very first things that you're going to do is configuring the org, testing the org, completing the training. Those are all part of the things that you have to pretty much be done with before you embark on the cutover journey. When you've done that, it's time to actually complete the cutover. So what that means is you pick a specific date for when you want to do that cutover, and then you start performing specific cutover tasks. So some of those tasks are listed here in this little sample cutover slide here in the image. You'll need to turn off your channels and desk. You'll want to also enable those same channels in Service Cloud. So what we did today, we added a mailbox. So adding a mailbox in Service Cloud is one step. You want to also turn that same channel off in Service Cloud. And I'll show you, in desk.com. And I'll show you in a little bit where to do that. So you're enabling Service Cloud channels, but you're also disabling desk.com channels. Somewhere after that phase, after turning those channels on, turning them off in desk, you'll start the migration and you'll run the migration. And as your migration is running on the background, you may allow your agents to start working out of Service Cloud live. And then post-migration, when everything is done and completed, all the data has been copied over, you may find yourself doing a couple of post-migration cleanup tasks. A few things that we recommend is spot checking your data. You want to double check that the data that was migrated over looks accurate. And in addition to that, there is a very specific use case where if you were not able to resolve all your desk cases at the time of the cutover, then you may need to handle those in Service Cloud. So if you think that you may run into a scenario similar to that, I would highly recommend that you watch the full video that will cover that scenario in full. So with that, I'm going to hop in briefly to my org and show you where to turn off the actual here. So what you will do, so again, there are two parts of what you want to do here. The first part is you want to make sure that in your email to case area, you have already added your mailboxes in Service Cloud and preferably also confirmed that any routing addresses showing in this list, that they've all been tested and confirmed that emails are going in and out of Service Cloud properly. So after enabling those channels here, you'll want to log into desk.com and navigate to the channel section in desk.com and select email. And you want to turn off your inbound mail. And this is something that there's no way around it. You do have to turn off the inbound channel before you run your cutover and your last migration. So you can't run a Delta migration without turning this off. So this has to be done. It is always scary to click that toggle to move it to off and gray it out. And if you want to, you can also turn off the outbound channel if you would like. If that is something that you would want to do as well. But the most important part here is the inbound channel. If you've already added it into Service Cloud and confirmed that it's working, you do have to turn it off in desk.com as well before you run your Delta migration. So I just wanted to make sure you all know where that is located. And if you have other channels such as Facebook or Twitter, you would need to turn those off as well to make sure that all inbound channels in desk are turned off before you do that. That leads me to the almost the last slide. This is the last one, and then we'll take questions and continue the discussion. You've set up your org, you've done the testing, you've trained your team, you've added your macros, quick text, rules, email setup done and tested, and the cutover is completed. Where do you go next? We want to make sure that you know where to turn if you are stuck on anything after the migration, after the delta, after the cutover, when everything has been said and done and completed. So there's a number of resources available to you here. The first one is really the success community, and you'll find all the links in the deck that is in the handout. The success community is where all our customers come together, ask questions, and publish answers and FAQs. So this is a great resource where you can do a quick search. It's almost like Googling within the success community. You can find a lot of questions and answered already in there. Most likely anything that you may run into, someone else has already had that same issue or same question, and someone has been able to assist them on that issue. So success community is always personally my first stop to find answers. But let's not forget about Trailhead. Trailhead is a free learning tool. We do have a lot of learning units and modules that cover a lot of content, including a lot of Service Cloud modules. And if you don't find the help that you need from these resources, you can always contact support. So there is a Salesforce help. As you can see on the image here, there is a dedicated help tab inside the success community where you can find help articles. If none of that is helpful, then you can always log a case with Salesforce. And I wanted to show you real quick how that is done. Not everyone knows where to access the support. So you do that from within your org. You click that question mark at the very top. And if you scroll down, there is a little briefcase and it says get support. And if you click on that, it will automatically take you to the right page where you can log a case with support. So if you've tried everything, you've done all of the Googling around, and you're not finding the answers that you need, then there's an option here to create a case, and that will be logged with our technical support team. And with that, I think that is all we have. We've added some visual content for those who are more of a visual learner. So there's an event calendar, and there's also a very extensive video library. So definitely take some time reviewing that content. And I know I did a lot of talking, but let's hand it back over to Patrick. And let me pause my sharing here.
Perfect. Thank you. And great job, and very in-depth and everything too, which is great. And that I think answered maybe a lot of questions we had as well. So real quick too, I want to talk a little bit about the things. We'll definitely go to questions next year, but a couple things we didn't cover here today would be any sort of phone or CTI integration, any sort of approval process, social media, app exchange, add-ons, SSO for communities, connected apps, case merging, and case threading. If you do have questions around this, Barb did a great job in providing that additional information right there for you. So you can click on one of them, and that should take you to a page that will talk a little bit more about those specific features. And then one last thing too, before we are going to take questions here, is to talk about feedback. So like we said in the very beginning, this is the very first time we've ran this type of webinar before, or masterclass. So if you do have feedback, there'll be a survey at the very end, and we'd really, really appreciate any sort of feedback we can have around this. That way we can improve for the future. So without further ado here, I have a couple questions here in the questions panel here. The first question I see here is the community logins included with the license swap, is that 24 hours or 1 month access? Barb, Suzanne, do you by chance know if, I know the renewal management side of things would know the answer to that with all certainty, but I'm not so sure on my side. Would you know?
So the way that it generally works, so let me just kind of take one step back. So if you have a desk help center or desk support center that you just show your FAQ articles and your cases, you're going to be using what's called like just the regular help center. That's majority of use cases. For those of you that on the desk side had some kind of logged in experience for customers, that's when those logins are going to be relevant. And so it's usually 1,000 logins times the number of users, but I'm not sure exactly what you're referencing, like the 24-hour or one month access. I think it's, as I understand, it's per session. So we can follow up with that a little bit, because I'd probably just want to understand how you're using it so we can give you the best answer. So if you want to just give us a little bit more context, that would be helpful. But I would say for most people, you're not probably going to be setting up the logged in community. The help center is not even, like, you don't even have to worry about logins for the help center.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, sorry, one question I saw a little bit earlier was with kind of what Suzanne was talking about with emails. So Michael, your question was more about what to do, like, in terms of connecting your emails. So Patrick, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, when should people really connect their address fully versus like just using the email service address to test?
Sure, and that's like when do we configure email to case is what you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, so like, should
Sure.
we give different guidance if you're going to production, into the trial org, or if you're doing a sandbox setup? And like, should you just be connecting fully, or should you be like just using the routing address for testing?
So yeah, so that's a great question. So the way I like to think of it is email to case as a general rule. There's a couple different ways you can look at it. Fully setting up the entire thing from start to finish should be one of the last things you're doing. And the reason why that is because if cases are still flowing into Desk and they're flowing into Salesforce, it might cause confusion amongst your teams of, where are we actually working out of, which isn't ideal. So there's two different approaches you can take. The first one here is if we look here at email to case, we can create email to case accounts in setup, as Barb was kind of saying right there, and just use the specific routing address without having everything configured. So if we just go to setup right here, and all I did is I click the gear up here and click setup, and we type in email, don't forget the dash, email dash to case, you can set up your email address, but not fully have it set up yet. Meaning, if you actually use this email address right here, that will go into my Salesforce instance. So you can use that for testing, so it's not forwarding everything over to Salesforce yet. Alternatively, too, if you don't want to use this, the other way too is that you could always set up like a Gmail account, for an example, that's just meant for testing. So obviously this Patrick Bagel 1920 at Gmail isn't a real support address, but I just created it for the purposes of demo testing and talking about it that way too. So yeah, but all, Barb, does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I hope so. We can let Michael let us know if that does answer it, or if he wants a little bit more info.
Perfect. Okay, and I see a question here of the logins have to, okay, so this goes back to the community logins. Okay, all right.
Which question are you looking at?
I believe it was just answered. It had to do with the community logins question. I think it had to do with like the 1,000 logins we were talking about. I think it had to do with like people logging in and actually answering cases and everything, I believe is what we were going for there.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, I just put a little bit more info into that, Mick, for you. So if you are doing the multi-pass feature in Desk, so the caveat there is it's a little bit more complicated on the Salesforce side. One of the links that we have is a little bit more around single sign-on, so how you let your users log in with your company credentials into the community. So I would say if you have some questions about that, we can definitely help you afterwards. But it's, I will just say truthfully, it's more complicated and it'll take a little bit longer to set up because you'll need to have a third-party authenticator like Okta in between to be able to authenticate your users. So just a little bit of warning at the get-go.
Perfect. Excellent. Let's go down the list here. So there is a question here from Vincent. Says, hello, I am quite new on both Desk and Service Cloud and just got told a few days ago I will be involved with the migration. In terms of testing in a sandbox environment, will I be able to create a sandbox environment that has the same data as the current Salesforce instance as I can test with data, test the data migration fully? So to answer that question, what I would say is that it depends upon the type of sandbox you're using. So if let's just say this is right here, and if I type in, just go to setup here, type in sandboxes, there's different kinds of sandboxes here. So without getting too much in the specifics of what kind of type of environment you would have, there's 4 different kinds here. There's developer, developer pro, partial copy, and full. There's limitations around all of them. So for an example, developer pro, for an example, I believe you can bring over 10,000 records per object, meaning that you can bring over from production to your sandbox, from Salesforce production to a Salesforce sandbox, you can bring over 10,000 contacts, 10,000 accounts, and so on. That would use up a lot of the space and storage you have or all of it potentially when you're using Desk. So it kind of depends upon how much testing you really want to do would determine what kind of sandbox you'd want to use. Okay, and then I saw, okay, Suzanne, I see there was a talk about inbound and outbound email addresses. Which one was that? I'm sorry.
If you click the show answer question, I just wanted to make sure everyone were aware of the email setup that I went through. So the question was around how to add the outbound. And the answer to that is when you're using the email setup, or if you're adding the mailbox the traditional way, when adding a mailbox to Service Cloud, the outbound is added at the same time. So it's not a 2-step process. You just add your mailbox once, and that covers both inbound and outbound from Service Cloud.
Yep, that's a great point. Yeah, so if you do use the migration wizard, that'll configure both of them for you. And then, yeah, so there's like in Desk, like it's not broken out. Yeah, I think it's a great question too. Excellent. Lots of questions here, which is good, which is great. Okay. So there's a question here. We did have a login experience in one of our support portals in Desk, this is from Christine, where customers could log in to create cases, edit cases, upload file attachments to cases, and also view the previously created cases. What are the best resources to help me work on recreating all that in Service Cloud? I've worked on it a bit, but I haven't gotten very far. So with that type of functionality, it is definitely more advanced. There's a document, there's the community's documentation that I would recommend. I don't know offhand if that's included here in this, but it definitely is still possible. And the thing I would say is that it's tougher to say, like, yes, this is possible to do, but for an example, if you want to say when users can recreate and edit and see the previous cases they put in, the tougher part might be of how are users accessing that? Is that internal versus external users? So a lot of that is possible. And again, though, would take some additional setup there for you in order. Perfect. Okay, so this one's from Jordan here. How do we make sure our support email is CC'd or BCC'd on each reply? It would need to be a different email per queue, since each queue would need to be a different support email. So a question like that, as far as the formula goes, and this is something where maybe you've had experience in this, but when we do auto CC or BCC, usually what that is going to be a formula. If it's based upon per email address, I personally have not done. So if we go into setup right here, I'll show you where to find that. And we just log in, let's say, to setup right here, and we go over to Object Manager. And from here, since that would be on the case object here, you can do case or email. Let's try case first. So we'll go to the case object right here, and it is going to be under, maybe actually is email. Let's check on the email message object right here. So let's see, we'll go to fields and relationships right here. And then we have a CC and BCC right here. Okay, maybe not here. Barb, Suzanne, do you remember actually where this is by chance?
Sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead,
go ahead.
Suzanne.
Sorry,
Wait,
it was just it's. I'm sorry.
Which part are you trying to do? Are you trying to do like where it's who's getting BCC'd? Maybe I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure, yeah. So the question was, how do we make sure that we're getting email addresses CC'd or BCC'd in there? The second part of it it's dynamic based upon which support address is sending out the email. The second part I'm not too sure about, but I figured I'd show how to at least like where to find the formula itself.
So what's the use case? Because I mean, if you're just manually wanting to like BCC and CCC people, the agent can click on that line in the email editor. Who asked the question? Maybe we can just unmute them and get the question unpacked a little bit. I just want to make sure I'm answering the right question.
Sure. Jordan, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you there.
Okay.
Let's see if I'm able to do so.
Here, I think I found him. Okay, yeah. Hey, Jordan.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So the use case is just simply using reply themes in Desk. You know, you have an email, and because cases are also tracked via email a little bit too, because it goes to a larger group of people with a shared email box. So the idea being that for every response from the ticketing system, you want to make sure the support email is also getting it as well. And that's how we've used it with Desk, for for 7 years. And so like it's very common to have each support email be either CC'd or BCC, doesn't matter which, but that way it's tracked on the email side. So there's always a hard record outside of the ticketing system that something was responded to that can be tracked. Does that make sense? So
yeah,
I get a ticket, I respond, the system just automatically CCs the same support email. That's all.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So you don't want your agents to add it manually. You just want it to go to a different system for like hard record keeping. Yeah, that is, is that email templates? I'm just trying to think where we actually hard code in a BCC line or a CC.
Because I know there's the global setting, but that would be across Salesforce, and we don't want to do that because it would affect other parts of our organization. So it was more figuring out, is there some sort of formula? And I started digging into it a little bit, and I was like, well, I'd rather ask the question.
Yeah, I think there is. Patrick or Suzanne, if you guys
so
don't
for
know
fun,
right now, that could be a follow-up question.
Yeah, so actually it'd be underneath case right here. And underneath, when we click on the case object, we click on buttons, links, and actions, and then click on email right here. And this has the formula right here that I was looking for earlier from the from address, the to address, and BCC as well. I'm thinking you could probably like have a predefined field right here to say,
okay, yeah,
you know, fill out the CC field when we're doing this. Having it dynamic though is the part that I'm not too sure how that would work exactly. It may take a little bit of configuration.
Right, it'd be per queue, so that would be it wouldn't have to be dynamic based on the email. Just each queue would have its own, because each queue would be its own email basically. So since this is more going to be a global support teams, and different teams have different email support addresses for specific clients. That's all.
Maybe that's actually process builder. If it's queue based, I'm not sure how we would set that up, because you would need something to basically change it on the back end depending on the email. Like on the inbound, we can set the queue that it goes to, but there's no way to set like a BCC on the inbound. So I think we have to do that with process builder. That's my guess, but I don't know if Patrick or Suzanne, you guys have other ideas on that one.
Yeah, I think it would definitely take some configuration on that, but
all right, we can take this offline. Doesn't need to be. I don't want to use up time here, but thanks for at least checking it out.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so this is another question here. I transferred the articles to Salesforce. When I did the migration, I also chose topics. I did not see any topics being transferred. Also, right now we have this website is our website. How do I enable the same look to my customers using Knowledge? So the first question I would have, and Sarah, I might unmute you for this. Actually, I think I'll go ahead and do that right now. Hi, Sarah, how are you?
Hi.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. How are you?
I'm good, Peter. Is this Peter? Or sorry?
Patrick, but yes.
Patrick, sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you transferred.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, so you transferred articles to Salesforce. Did you use the desk migration wizard for that?
Yes, I did. And then I had an option at the top with the checkbox where I can choose the topics also to be transferred. I did check that in. But after the transfer, when I go to my Salesforce site and look into the knowledge area, I only see the articles transferred, not the topics. I mean,
Gotcha.
topics in desk is basically a group of articles. Think of it like a folder structure, right?
Yeah. So with that being said, did you create have you created your community yet at all, or no?
I did create a community after the fact, but I don't see anything in the community either. So I'm a little lost here on how to accomplish this. I mean, there are two questions, two parts to my question. One is why is that I'm not seeing the topics, and the second question is in my questions where I typed in, I provided you a link to our desk.com. This is basically, we have a website which is blooms.com, and we have a support button there. When the customer, anybody can come to our website. It's not just our logged in customer, but if they click on the support button in our website, they are actually redirected to that link that I showed you. So if you click on that link, you will see that all the articles that we have created in Desk are nicely arranged into different topics and are easier, and there is a search box at the top, and it's easier for the customer to browse through the articles, learn how to do things on Blooms, or type in some questions and then they can browse through the FAQs. It's more like a self-service support resources for them.
Hey, Patrick,
Gotcha.
I can take the question if you want.
Perfect.
Yeah. So thanks for the question. So what this is basically the blooms.desk.com. So that's your desk help center. So that's the one topic we can't really go into a lot of detail because it's going to take a little while. But I can just give you, I'll give you a link to the masterclass. In summary, if you've already migrated the articles, the topics have actually already come along, but we'll show you where to find them. So Patrick, if you can go back into the all cases area in your, did you have articles migrated in this org?
That's a good question.
Let's take a look, because I'll just show you where to find them. Yes.
Perfect.
Okay, those are, yeah. If you click on like maintenance guidelines number 4, that's one of my bike articles. So this is basically going to be a copy of what you had in your desk article, or at least in mine. And the topics are actually stored as something called categories. So on the right side of the screen, you should see this widget called categories, desk articles, and then the actual topic is going to be bike maintenance in my scenario. So in your scenario, you would have about Blooms, FAQ, I'm a teacher, what's new and recent updates. So those article topics have been brought over. Now it's possible that you actually don't see that categories component on the right-hand side. If you don't see that entire block there, just know that that's probably because it's not been added on from a case layout point of view. So in a similar way where we can edit certain fields on layouts on cases, we can do the same thing on knowledge articles and add different components. So if you don't see that, come to an office hours and we can show you how to add that on as well. But all of that data that was migrated has everything. It just may not be properly showing. So I'll provide the link to the masterclass for how to create, basically replicate what you had in the desk side. And this kind of goes to, I think it was maybe Michael's questions kind of related, so I'll answer that too. So the blooms.desk.com site is a really good example for anybody. Patrick, if you just want to show that. So you basically have your search bar and you have your articles. So there's nothing that's like a logged in experience. And so to replicate that, you are going to be using what's called communities, but there's sort of two flavors of communities. One is the full-fledged. So for a few of you guys that are going to be doing the actual logged in experience, you want to use communities. But there's also something called a help center, which is like communities light. And that gives you the ability just to basically do what you have here. Showcase articles, have a search, you can have a contact form as well. It's a little bit easier to set up, a little bit less configuration. And for, I think, 90% of people, the Help Center is the way to go. And the link in the masterclass I'll provide will cover that. So watch it, come to office hours. We can help you troubleshoot some of the gotchas, but you can definitely replicate what you have here, but it's going to look different. So it's not going to be exact, but you can do like the hero images and all that stuff. The layout, you can definitely tweak a little bit. It will be similar, but not exact.
I mean, I'm not married to the layout as such, but I definitely want to preserve the branding, the color theme, which actually ties into the rest of our website. We don't want to look at, and also I want to show if you see the main menu on the top, the teachers, parents, schools, those are the rest. If you click on any of that, that will take to the actual website of ours. So, and all these have to be preserved. Do you think this is all achievable?
Yeah, so you can do HTML links, all that stuff. Again, this is a little bit above and beyond what we can cover today because it's like a whole other topic in itself. So thanks for the questions, Sarah. We'll follow up with the resource and then come and ask questions once you've had a chance to look at that, okay?
Yeah, sure. I'll go through, I'll check if my topics have been transferred or not. If it is not showing, I'll see if I can kind of tweak the layout so that I can see that component there. And once I do that, and then I will definitely need, I don't have any resource for me to help. What would be my next steps to create a help center on Salesforce? If you can provide that, maybe I can go through it. And if I have questions or if I'm stuck, I can probably get into an office hours and seek help.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks so much, Sarah. I'll put you back on mute, but thanks for the question.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Barb, jumping in there and everything. Perfect. So there's another question here of, let me see. Is there a way to custom sort list views so they don't show up alphabetically? I actually looked into this yesterday and I was unable to find a way to do that. I know that the question here is going to be about how to sort the list view right up here, up at this part. And unfortunately, this is not customizable. There is an idea article about it at the moment, but beyond that, there wouldn't be anything that'd be customizable. So hopefully something we can add on in the future. Excellent. Barb, Suzanne, is there anything that either of you would like to take out for a question at the moment?
I think for those, there were a few that did not see the migration wizard that wanted to do the walkthrough that you showed, Patrick. So I put the link in the chat. If you do not have the migration wizard installed, then most likely you have an existing Salesforce instance. So you can simply complete the steps in the article that is linked and install it in whichever org you want to make that installation to. We do recommend that you install in a sandbox first so you can test. But other than that, I think most questions that came through today were very specific to everyone's individual use case. So nothing comes to mind that we would call out other than the fact that, again, for mailboxes, you can connect multiple ones. There's no limit to only 2 or 3, so you can add multiple addresses. And again, the outbound is sort of added in itself, so no need to duplicate the effort. Nothing else comes to mind, Patrick. I think we have like one question left and got about 2 minutes left to go.
Perfect. Excellent, Barb. And anything from your side of things that that you want to add as well? Because I know we do have a couple follow-ups to have as well.
I would say, I guess, for any of you guys that have questions or you're kind of walking through and you're having trouble, make sure you come out to an office hours. We'll try to, because we have a pretty large group here, so we can't dive into too much in-depth troubleshooting. But if you come out to an office hours, we've got basically 3 of them each week. So come out, ask questions. We'll definitely be able to do reverse screen shares and you can show us exactly what's happening. Because like sometimes we just don't know exactly why you could be getting an error, especially if you have an existing org. So come out and we'll definitely be able to ask those questions. But just to reiterate what what's been said before, the trailheads are excellent. And the cool thing about Trailhead as well is you can create your own Trailhead playground. So you can test any of the things that you're learning without affecting your real Salesforce instance. So that's something to play around with as well. I think there was one question that I don't know if we answered, but maybe Suzanne, I think you may have answered the question. So for those of you guys who like the desk version of case locking, just know that that actually doesn't happen in Salesforce. So there's no way to lock records. So meaning if 2 people open up the case, the first person can edit it in desk and then the second person sees it in read only. That functionality is different in Salesforce. So what you can do is you can install what's called a case presence component, and that will just simply show you that a person, somebody else is viewing the record, but it doesn't actually prevent them from editing. So one of the things I would definitely get your team involved with before you actually go live is testing things out so they can get the feel for everything. And that's one thing I think from a change management point of view, you will need to inform your team about. So there's no instant case locking. You do have to sort of be aware if somebody else is working on the record, if that is potentially an issue for your team, if you have a lot of cases and a lot of people working in the same queues.
Perfect, Barb. So very last slide that we have. Thank you so much, everyone, for all the questions. Did we go over the existing resources yet, Barb? Sorry, I was bogged down in the questions. Did we cover the resources that we have on here?
Maybe not. I actually can't remember either.
That's okay.
But yeah.
This is all high level, but these are all links available to you for just additional resources. So we have a video library of helpful setup videos that will basically help you with that implementation and configuration page stage that we talked about. If you don't have a trial, you'll find the link here. If you want to sign up for additional webinars, you'll find the link here. And then we have some additional FAQs and other helpful resources. So you definitely make use of the resources that are shared. And I think we've reached the end of this class. I know it was a very long class, lots of information shared. We're hoping that it is helpful. And I can stay on for another 2 minutes. I know that we have a few questions that came in last minute here. So we'll answer those and then we'll go ahead and end the session. And for all of you that joined please take a moment to take the survey at the very end and just let us know if there was any information that you did need that was not already covered so that we can try to include that in a next session. So we'll be hosting another similar class next week. And then we have regular office hours that is run 3 days a week. So feel free to join those. And I know we got one question about trying to accommodate Asia and other time zones. We've been trying our best to spread out these office hours and classes over different time zones, but Asia has been a little bit difficult for us to cover. We don't really have our immediate team in a time zone that is similar to that, but we do have recordings available, so you can always head over to support.desk.com, which is our support center. You can type out the word masterclass or click into the Desk to Service Cloud Guide section, and you'll see plenty of video recordings for all the sessions that we're currently hosting. So I think with that, let's go ahead and wrap it up. We will share today's recording, and we'll throw it up on our support center as well so that you can view this recording and reference back to any of the information that we shared. All right, I think that was all.
Congratulations to everybody. You made it through a 2-hour-long webinar. So give yourselves all a pat on the back. Hopefully you've learned a lot, and we'll retain it all as well. All right, thanks so much, guys. Have a fantastic rest of the day, and follow up with the recording later on today.
Thank you.